And when all these good plants outside, I think if we go for a walk, take a look at some of the different exhibits that have some special plants, I'll point some things out. And I think that the way the tour will go will be up to you and the questions you might ask. And don't be afraid to ask questions. And we'll stop and maybe talk with a few of the exhibitors and see what you'd like to find out and what you'd like to see.
I want to know where you keep all your cactus.
In my greenhouse, except for the hardy ones that are in an outside garden. But I've always had a greenhouse. My collection started when my grandfather put me up on his little home greenhouse bench at age 3. And that was a 10 by 15. Now it's 100 by 30.
Is Cincinnati soil generally acid?
Depends on where you're standing.
All right.
If you're right down along the river, the soils are acidic. As you get out and away from the city and away from the river, I think generally down here the pHs will rise in alkalinity and you will find a higher pH.
Okay.
So it is always, I think, good to at least get a soil test to find out what kind of basic soils you are working with, and then look at what you might do to use the proper plants that are going to work in those soils, or what you might consider doing to amend your pHs. If you want to get into in alkaline soils, you're going to have to put sulfur on if you're going to grow rhododendrons. So it's grow the plants that fit your site and not try to make those, just put a plant in because you think it's going to look pretty.
Somebody has to invent, since you're a grower, I want somebody to invent an azalea that will grow in alkaline soil. Because I have alkaline soil at my place, and I mean, I get absolutely spectacular lilacs and, you know,
Right.
that sort of thing. But I lived in the South for a long time, and boy, do I miss those azaleas.
Yes, yeah. Well, lilacs are a plant that will grow in acid or alkaline soil.
Right.
And clematis is another plant.
What is?
Clematis will
Oh,
do
yeah.
very good in the
Right.
alkaline soil.
Yeah.
And because I come from acid soils,
Okay.
I say that people who come from acid soil areas come from God's country. We can grow so much, and it's so easy to amend. But for you, it is very, very difficult.
Yeah, it is hard.
Yeah. Here in Delhi, a lot of herbaceous plants that are being used, and also there's a move towards natives in landscapes. And today, looking at many of the native plants, some people are purists, they want that native species, and in one of the other gardens you're going to see some of those natives in one of the other marquee tents. But today you may not realize that these tiarellas, these heucheras, are all cultivars and selections of Native American wildflowers. And it's interesting how the heucheras went to Europe, into European gardens, because we always want something from the other side of the world. And then they come back with these special hybrids. And now the hybridization is being done in this country by people like Terra Nova Nurseries, who are bringing us new selections every season, so you can always have the newest and most interesting. Same thing with the tiarellas.
Do you think a garden gets dated because of the varieties? I mean, if you don't invest in new varieties, what does that do to your garden over time? Should you? Is it like a hat or a pair of shoes? You kind of need to update it.
Could you all hear this question? I think that's an interesting question, and the answer is sure.
Hey, remember he sells land.
Well, what I mean by that is, it's up to you, because it's so easy to do with annuals, and with perennials you can change in and out. But how many trees are you going to change in a lifetime? And how many trees are going to do for you what that tree is supposed to do in a lifetime? So we tend not to want to change out what I call the bones of the garden. That a garden changes in time. You plant a tree, and hoping for the shade, and then you finally get it and your children can play under it. And they do stand the test of time. But gardens, if you take a photo of your garden every 10 years or even 5 years, watch how it changes. Watch how plants mature, and then watch what you do as gardens. We all do change our gardens out more than you realize, but we do it with these smaller plants. We move a shrub here or there, and our gardens change just with the way plants mature. And I think in some of the other gardens, if I remember, I'll show you where you might be by something that you may think is going to be this big, and pretty soon it's this big. The other thing I've found over years, every plant I've ever met is illiterate. Not one of them has read its description. But
Oh, yeah.
But in the case of Tiarellas, these do change because Terra Nova and others are always bringing out new selections. But these are selections from native plants. And so many of them are wonderful for foliage, in season, they are attractive. This one I'm not sure. This particular one does not have a particular fragrance, but so many of them. One in particular that I like is Ninja. And it has a wonderful fragrance, and it's one of our Tiarellas, and it also has pink shaded flowers. There's azaleas in here, Gibraltar. These are some of the hybrid azaleas. Gibraltar's one that's been around for many, many years. Today we're also seeing many of the native selections of deciduous azaleas, and they are becoming more and more popular, and there's hybrids of those as well. The trees, the conifers here are one of my favorite conifers, one of my favorites. This is the Japanese white pine, or Pinus parviflora glauca. And you notice the cones? Those cones were formed in that tree 2 years ago. And the first year they will hold on green, and then the second year they will come out brown and open up. But it's a 2-year cone. And after you get a tree that will start to mature, you can sometimes have the green and the older cone on at the same time. And these are plants that I call the bones of the garden because they're the plants that can create winter interest. And to see those cones on a frosty morning with a little bit of frost on them is absolutely beautiful. But I enjoy it because of this, the two types of cones that you can get. The other thing is it's a tree that will fit into your garden. I've had one in my landscape now for about 15 years, and it's still between 12 and 15 feet tall. And they tend to top out, and in the case of Parviflora glauca, and get flat top. So it's not a Christmas tree. You want to let this grow naturally. And that's the other thing with so many of these plants, that you don't want to put a shear to them and just chop them into little round balls or squares. Use a pruning shear. Clip to form a plant, but not necessarily to beat it into submission. Do you see anything in here that you might have particular questions about?
The rooftop garden, I just noticed.
Yes. What do you think about that?
That's cool.
Well, that is really a new wave in gardening today, and especially with the greening of America and looking at sustainability. Especially in the city of Chicago, many of the buildings are mandated to have green roofs. And it means that a green roof has got to be a structure that can hold weight. They put a waterproof liner on them, and then they use a very light media so that it drains and can take the water off the building that can be used in recycling. And you've got to have plants that are going to survive up there. And the succulents are perfectly made for that situation. As you can see, there are many types and many species of sedums. Now, if you put grasses on a roof, and think about this, if that was grasses up there, what would be the possibility? They probably survive pretty well with many of the prairie grasses and so forth. But what happens with the prairie? It can turn brown, but it can burn. So the fact that you have succulent plants, not only are they going to hold up against that, but they're also fire retardant. So to me, the succulents make the most sense in a green roof. Other interesting plants, this is one of the witch hazels. It is out of bloom right now. Arnold's Promise is a hybrid of one of the Asian witch hazels, or of the Asian witch hazels. They have fragrant flowers. They will flower in Cincinnati in late January or February and into early March. And the way I talk about the winter garden, I think about witch hazels with our native species, Hemamelis virginiana, which is a fall bloomer. And it reminds me that winter is coming. But it is Arnold's Promise and these hybrids that flower in January or February that remind me that winter is ending and spring is around the corner.